The cardiovascular system of the body is made up of the central and peripheral nervous systems. The peripheral nervous system are the blood vessels, which are the arteries, arterioles, the capillaries, the venules, and the veins. The arteries send blood from the heart to the rest of the body, traveling through the arteries to the smaller arterioles, to the capillaries, to the venules, to the veins, which bring the blood back up to the heart. Through this, each blood vessel has a muscle pump inside the vessel, which allows blood to continue in one direction throughout the body. So that way, whenever you're standing up, blood is still being pumped up to your heart and your brain and not traveling back down to your feet and making you pass out every second of the day.
The part of the cardiorespiratory system that I'm going to talk about today is the peripheral part of the cardiovascular system. This part is made up of the blood, and the blood is then made up of two things, the solids and the liquids. The liquid portion is mainly plasma, which is mostly water and electrolytes. Then the solids are really what's important, and that is made up of the red blood cells, which are carried by hemoglobin for oxygen transport. Within the process of oxygen transport, there is something called the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. This graph and curve says that at rest, there is 100% saturation of oxygen in the hemoglobin, but as you start to work out more intensely, the oxygen can then be offloaded or disassociated more quickly and easier.
So the superior vena cava is responsible for taking blood from the body to the right atrium of the heart, and the pulmonary veins are responsible for taking blood from the lungs to the heart.
There's two ventricles. The pulmonary arteries take the blood from the heart to the right ventricle, and the left ventricle brings blood from the heart to the body. Aorta is the major artery of the body.
Okay. The heart involuntarily contracts through conduction, and the order of this signal is from the SA node to the AV node, which then the signal travels down the Purkinje fibers, and this causes ventricular contraction, and this whole process takes approximately 0.2 seconds.
Okay. There's a P wave, which is the atrium contraction. There's an QRS complex, is the ventricle contraction and the atrium relaxed. There's the T wave, that's the ventricle relaxed.
So the cardiac cycle consists of two parts, the pump of the heart and the flow of the blood out of the heart.
Rate pressure product is important for systolic blood pressure and heart rate because it measures how hard the heart works.
And the other part of the pump is the mean arterial pressure, which is important for figuring out diastolic blood pressure, which is basically the resistance that the blood faces going downstream.
And that's the heart.
All right, next we're going to talk about respiration within the respiratory system. Specifically, we're going to talk about the flow of oxygen. And we know that first oxygen goes through the nasal cavity, into the trachea, or through the trachea, and then it goes into the lungs. And in the lungs, it goes through the left and right bronchi, and into the bronchioles, and then into the alveoli, okay? And during inspiration, we know that the rib cage expands, and the external intercostal muscles lift up and pull air in. And then during expiration, we know that external intercostal muscles relax, the rib cage shrinks, and the lungs push air out. And that is expiration. And that, my friends, is the flow of oxygen within the respiratory system.
There are two intercostal muscles, the external intercostal muscle and the internal intercostal muscle. The external intercostal works when the lungs expand and relax when we breathe out. The internal intercostal muscle works to push out air during expiration. When talking about gas exchange in the body, the key things to note are that the arterial blood oxygen pressure differentiates from oxygen pressure in the venous blood, and the same goes for CO2. Arterial blood, the pressure of oxygen is 100, pressure of CO2 is 40. In venous blood, the pressure of oxygen is 40, and the pressure of CO2 is 46. Change to these values will be problematic. The blood-gas barrier is found in the alveolar and is the barrier that prevents air bubbles from forming in blood, and blood entering the air also stops blood from entering the alveoli during these exchanges.